The Game Schooler podcast is a weekly audio show that educates new and experienced gamers about the awesomeness of tabletop gaming. In this week's episode, we'll cover Potions of Azerland, our game of the week, discuss how you know when you're too deep in the hobby in the school of gaming, and wrap it up by revealing our high five games that feel like a simulation in a good way. Welcome to the Game Schooler podcast. I'm your host, Doug Kotecki, along with my co-host, Dr. Michael McCabe. How's it going, Michael?
Oh, great, Doug. How are you?
I am pretty good. A little tired getting back from a quick little road trip getaway during spring break just to keep everybody fresh.
But you're a little tired? That sounds
yes.
about right.
Yep, that's a dad's job. Come home tired, exhausted, that type of thing.
But you guys had a good time, right?
Yeah, it was good. Got to visit some game stores and just see what else is out there. Something I like to do when I go out of town is what are other game stores like and things like
research.
that.
That's what we call it, right?
Yeah. Very in-depth research, white glove testing, all of the floors and countertops, that type of thing.
Oh, good. Well, did you have a good trip?
Yeah, it was good. Good.
Excellent. I have some follow-up, Doug.
All right, lay it on me.
I mentioned to you that I may be following up with Amigo, our contact there, because our game of the week last week, Bonanza Dahlia, there was something that was just gnawing at me. You know, ich spreche ein bisschen Deutsch, aber nicht sehr gut. I apologize to any of our German listeners. I speak a little bit of German, but it's not very good. But I thought, Bonanza is a play on, it's a German pun, Bonanza, right? And I thought, Bonanza with Dahlia, there's something there. I think Beth Sobel is involved in this somehow. And here's what we heard back from our contact at Amigo. Beth originally submitted an email to our general email account in 2021 asking if we had any plans to ever do a retheming of Bonanza. At the time, nothing like that was on her radar, but when she reached out, that changed pretty quickly. So that's cool, that an artist reached out to the publisher and said, hey, have you ever thought about reimagining or retheming Bonanza? And then Beth Sobel teams up with Uwe Rosenberg, and that led to the game of the week that we covered last week, and a game that we both love that is in both of our collections. So just wanted to follow up with our listeners on that. And it's
cool.
Really appreciate Corey at Amigo, getting back to us so timely and letting us know as well. So
awesome. Cool. It's always interesting to see hear the stories of how things come about. And of course, we've got some relationships with the publishers and some designers, and you get a little bit of the backstory sometimes, and it can be pretty interesting to see, whoa, this idea started here, but then it branched off into this other direction, and then somebody else took a hold of it, and before you know it, it's a completely either a different game or the awesome game that you know it to be, and maybe the first iteration was not the same good game or as good as the final product. So that's cool to hear some of those behind the scenes things. Anything for awesomeness in gaming?
I do have some awesomeness. How about yourself? Do you have some awesomeness?
I do.
But before we go into that, I want to follow up on one thing.
Yeah.
We often encourage folks to engage with the Discord. I want to follow up based on a comment that I made in the follow-up section last week, and I hope that I don't say follow-up anymore in this entire episode. And that's Doug's been doing some great work with getting our reviews, our videos all lined up out on Board Game Geek. So if that is a way that you want to engage, if Discord isn't your primary method of engagement with the Game Schooler podcast, we're over there. We don't have a forum or anything like that, and we don't have any plans to do that. But I'm keeping an eye on the Game Schooler U Board Game Geek account, and I know Doug is as well. And so we're posting some of our videos and reviews after we talk about them on the show. They're getting posted to Board Game Geek if you want to go comment or interact with them at all. So just wanted to follow up on that.
Yeah, and that's a great opportunity to talk about kind of where we're heading and what we're kind of trying to do in regards to YouTube. And we talked about having a bigger presence and putting some more stuff out there. And we experimented a little bit with throwing different video segments into the podcast and things like that. But as it stands right now, and I know people enjoy that. I know people enjoy the overview videos and the quick 2-minute type of thing. And we're not completely abandoning that idea, but it's just going to be a little bit different. So going forward, as of right now, the plan is that Friday morning, alongside the audio podcast, the video podcast will be released. For all intents and purposes, that will have very little video editing. It's just the video of Michael and I talking while we're recording the podcast.
Who would want to watch that when they can just listen to it? I'll never understand. But back to you, Doug.
I think it makes people feel closer to us.
Oh, boy.
But from there, we are going to be pulling out the Spotlight Game of the Week and the Game of the Week as reviews. And with that, the descriptions or the script that I would use for the overview videos, I will continue to be writing, and those will be in the episodes. So you will get that kind of overview description. In the review videos that come out, we will be having clips of gameplay and pictures of the game set up and all of that, and graphics for the skills that we're talking about. The cover art, all of those type of things will show up in our review videos. So if you're somebody that's like, oh, I just want to see it kind of on the table, that's where that content will be
on
going
YouTube
forward.
Or Board Game Geek, either one.
Yep. Yeah. In the reviews for the Spotlight of the Week and the Game of the Week, that's where you can find that. And I think you'll have a good chance to get the same type of feel of the overview, and that's going to be in the first 3 minutes of the video anyway, without some of the logistical headaches that come in on the back end for us that we won't have to worry about. So if you like that content, I encourage you to try the Spotlight and the review Game of the Week to get that same type of content, just in a slightly different package. So that's all I've got for follow-up.
Awesome.
As far as what's awesome, we mentioned that we went on a little bit of a road trip, and I want to do a little shout out to the All Play, which used to be Board Game Tables, but their bag for carrying games. And it's one that I've used a lot, but really comes in handy of putting a stack of games into the trunk of my car with suitcases and air mattresses and everything else that gets packed in a car, and I know that it's going to be safe and protected, and get to the hotel, the house, and everywhere in between in one piece, and kind of keep everything organized. And so if you're looking for something like that, I know a lot of people just use like the giant IKEA bags, or I used to have a bag that I got from our cable company that was like just the perfect little bag to fit like 2 or 3 Ticket to Ride games in it. But if you're looking for something that, we're going for a weekend or something, I want to bring a lot of games, that is a great solution. Don't wear it on your back. That's weird. There are straps for it to be on your back, but it's like
weird and life-threatening to others in a convention
certainly
hall. Oh, my goodness.
Not in a convention hall. Looks like you have a giant Lego on your back.
Man, and we've retold this story a few different times, but Gen Con 2023, I almost lost my life when a very nice gentleman turned around, and I had my closest moment to Neo in the Matrix, where I had to do a full back extension and dodge this board game table bag from swiping my head while Doug is grabbing me by the shoulder and pulling me back. So, yeah, don't wear their bags on your back is a great suggestion for friends and family and loved ones. That's when you know you're too deep into the hobby. That's our segment coming up in the School of Gaming.
That's our primary focus at Gen Con, is keep each other alive.
Yes.
Head on a swivel as you go through the hall. But that's my what's awesome in gaming. I just wanted to highlight that. I think it's a pretty cool product, and it has certainly come in handy for me a lot.
Nice. Yeah, I played some games that we've reviewed in the past and have been in our this past weekend. I played Museum Suspects, which was episode 125. And it was just interesting. I've been going back on Board Game Geek and linking our podcast episodes to the games, and I had just linked that game when my 9-year-old grabbed it off the shelf almost within an hour of each other and said, I want to play this one, Dad. Yeah, let's play. And we got it to the table and got to play. Just an awesome game that Phil Walker Harding designed and Blue Orange published, and a fun game of trying to figure out through deduction who stole the piece of art, or did they get away from it? And you have a little bit of bidding going on, and just fun to play games with our kids and just play them to have fun. And it's like, man, we've covered a lot of games. And then why is that in the What's Awesome with Gaming? We're on break. We're on spring break in our house, and there have just been so many wonderful moments of gaming and interacting with the hobby. And I don't want to get into all of them because I plan on covering a lot of them over the next several weeks, but just had a really good time getting games to the table. And I threw some pictures out on our Discord. They're over there in the solo section and in the What's Playing section, and really enjoyed interacting with folks over on our Discord as well. So
yeah, those breaks are a great opportunity for spontaneous gaming.
Yeah.
Stuff that just kind of comes out of nowhere.
Unplanned gaming. Yep.
All right. Well, our spotlight of the week this week is Enchanted Plumes, which came out in 2021 from Calliope Games designer Brendan Hansen. The artist is Echo Chernick. 2 to 6 players, about 20 to 40 minutes, ages 8+ according to the box. That's probably right. There's not too much to handle on there. But it's a remarkable bird, the peacock. Beautiful plumage, isn't it? In Enchanted Plumes from Calliope Games, players strive to complete magical peacocks by assembling plumes in rows from top to bottom with the help of colored and numbered feather cards. Each player receives 9 cards and must draw down to 6 at the start of the game. Shuffle the remaining cards and reveal 5 to create the train. On your turn, players use 1 to 2 cards from their hand to create a new plume or add to an existing plume. You assemble a plume by playing cards from top to bottom. The top row can be as many cards as you like, but those cards will count as negative points at the end of the game. Every card below the top row will count as positive points at the end of the game. In addition, the colors in each row determine which colors you may use in the row below it. Lastly, once you start another row, you can no longer add cards to the row above it. You complete a peacock when its plume tapers to a single card row. The final card is flipped over to reveal the peacock in all its glory and will score bonus points at the end of the game. After adding cards to plumes, players replenish their hands by either drawing 2 cards from the feather deck, swapping 2 cards from their hand with the train, or drawing 1 and swapping 1 card. Players have a strict hand limit of 6 cards and can never draw a 7th. The game immediately ends when the player draws the peahen card shuffled into the draw pile's final 7 cards. When scoring cards in the top row of each plume score negative points based on their number value, and all lower rows score positive points. Completed peacocks also score 1 point for each card used to build them, and the player with the most points wins. The choice is yours. Do you want to build one giant peacock or a muster of them? Either way, they should have remarkable plumage. I hope some people get the inside joke in that reading, and I'll leave them to comment on either the video or the Discord server when they know what was in that description. But that is Enchanted Plumes. Very tricky game of kind of for me, a push and pull type of game that usually shows up, or a mechanism that usually shows up in classic 2-player games.
Yeah.
But plays up to 6 players. So there is that kind of looking around the table and, oh, you've got that card. And I need that. How many of those color cards are left? How many of those numbered cards are left? And trying to figure out whether you want to go big with one giant one or go small with a bunch of different ones. And I love that it gives so much variety in the way that you can try and score points. But that race is just always ticking, right?
Yeah, and you can't plan too many moves ahead, right? You have to be somewhat tactical and keep an eye on which group of peacocks you're building out and what's in front of you and what you can play into specific groupings. I've found myself in more than one game of this get too tied into wanting to do something that the game just wasn't allowing me to do. It really does reward that tactical thinking.
Yeah.
I think comprehension as well. If you could kind of see what the possible combos are and make them happen and make them fit, you're going to be rewarded, especially in repeated plays of Enchanted Plumes.
Yeah, so there are 10 cards numbered 0 to 9 in 10 different feather colors. So it becomes a situation where as you're going along and more peacocks get built and there's more plumes out there, you can find out that's like, oh, wait, there are no more red cards available. Like,
Yep.
I'm kind of in a
it.
bind here, so maybe I need to do a yellow. And I do also like the idea that in some games when you're building kind of that reverse pyramid and there's a color restriction on it, a lot of time those games will have like, if you have a red and a blue here, then the card below it needs to be a red and a blue. This game doesn't work like that. If you have a red and blue above it, you can have red and blue anywhere in the row below it. So you're not necessarily, you could potentially be narrowing down, but it doesn't necessarily mean that your next red one needs to go under the red and blue. It could go under the yellow and green on the other side, is just as long as you have that color in the row above. So it is narrowing down. It does have a little bit of that calico type of thing as the game goes on. You're like, the requirements are harder to achieve to get down to the bottom. And how long do you hold out of like, I'd like to make this one bigger, but I also want to keep those cards on the top row low.
Yeah.
So they don't score a bunch of negative points.
And early game, you also have to be thinking, if I put this fifth card down, I am now really stuck to this group. I need to build 4, then 3, then 2, then slap the peacock on it, right?
Yeah.
Versus if you just commit to the 3-2-1 approach, 3-2-1 approach, and build a bunch of those. So there's multiple pathways towards victory based on that I think really changes based on the number of players you're playing and how often you've played it.
Well, and certainly it goes without saying that the artwork on this is beautiful. I mean, I just love it's amazing how with just simple cards at the end of the game as you go along, like they look like peacock feathers all spread out with that reverse pyramid. You flip over the last card and put the peacock there. It really looks cool on the table when you play it. Anything else on Enchanted Plumes, Michael?
It's a fun game. I wanted to just get your take. You've played it more than I have on approachability. Where do you think that this game starts in terms of an entry point? And I only ask because Board Game Geek listed as 8+. The community says 8+. Do you think that's about right?
I think so. I mean, I think that you're going to certainly... I think the game is simple enough of... just the idea of like, yes, you want low cards on your first row. At some point, you need to go down to the second row, but there's no number matching. So it's like, I can put a 3 there. I can put a 2 there. I don't have to deal with that. I don't have to deal with the kids, questioning whether they can put, if this one has to be a red or a yellow. It's like, no, as long as it's above the row, you can put it anywhere in the row below it.
Yep.
So those kind of simplicity things, I think work, and I think you may have a game where, you have a kid that's like, I'm going to make a giant peacock, and maybe it works out for him, and maybe it doesn't.
Sometimes that kid is a 43-year-old man, Doc. Doesn't have to be a kid, huh?
Yes, I've seen it live and in color. But then the other thing too is like, you can do a 3-2-1 peacock, but you're only going to score 6 points.
Yep.
as your bonus from that one, which could be good if you've got high numbers in there.
Yeah, and that's where I was getting the comprehension. It's a fantastic game, and it's really affordable. I saw this at Noble Night last night for like $12.
Yeah.
I thought, man, that's a good deal. I'm not trying to get people out there just spending cash, but I'm saying this is a game that you will likely come across it in the secondary market or even for sale on Amazon or one of those for very affordable. And there's a fun family card game in there.
Yeah, well, and especially if you're looking for some just basic arithmetic, the addition and subtraction
And grouping, yep.
is going to be great. And I think that's another way that it fits in with that 8-year-old age range. And
the
another
other thing to just note with Calliope, they've told us that they support games for 10 years. And they've told us that on this podcast. Chris Leader, their director of fun, I believe is his official title. Want to get that right. I was kind of having an offline conversation with him about, I love this game, but I haven't played it. It's been 5 years. Is it going to be around? And then, as soon as we came on air on the podcast, he talked about we support games for 10 years from the time that we publish them. So it's 2021. The game's going to be around for a while and one that you should try if you get the chance.
Yeah, and I think the other thing, too, is that they make an effort to put have their games with a higher player count of up to 5 and 6 so that most families are capable of playing it with their size, So I have a family of 5, Michael has a family of 5, and sometimes it can get tricky when it's like, these games just play 4. So now what do we do? And that's a big deal for Calliope to have the 5 and 6 player games. I think they might all go up to 6, but I know above 4 is certainly a big deal to them.
Yeah, and it was a 2022 Mensa recommended, so thank you for that, Doug. Just really appreciate your organization making sure that makes its way in there. So,
all right, so that's our Spotlight Game of the Week, Enchanted Plumes from Calliope Games. Michael talked about the Discord server. Go check that out, gameschooler.com/Discord. Continue to watch.
I'm going to pause there. Pause there. No matter where you are in the hobby, because there are folks, there was a great little question that was put out recently just about, hey, I want to jump into Everdell, but I don't know what part of the universe to jump into, and that's by somebody who contributes to our Discord often. And so no matter where you're at in the hobby, you can rest assured of 2 things. 1, somebody is further ahead in some place than you are. And 2, you are behind somebody else in a different place, and both can be true. And I might have said it wrong there, but I mean, we're all at different places in the hobby. And if
you're
you have
ahead of someone and behind somebody
at the same time, Douglas, yes, you are. Yes, I am. The Game Schooler podcast Discord, that question spot. I'm just, every time I go in there, I'm impressed with the responsiveness of folks and the thoughtfulness as well. So really proud of our community there.
A lot of kind people there, and certainly a safe space to feel out of place, right? If that makes sense. If you're new and you're like, I don't even know, I don't want to feel like an idiot for asking this question. That's a great place to do it because they will be kind and welcoming and do all of the things to help you get to the answer or solution you need. Continue to watch, subscribe, and like our YouTube channel. We appreciate that. Continue to spread the word about the podcast. We love it when that happens. And if you have any questions or comments, reach out to us at email@gameschooler.com. Again, that's email@gameschooler.com. Now let's move on to the game of the week.
The game of the week. The game of the week is an in-depth look at a family-friendly game we think you should try if you get the chance. This week's game is Potions of Azerland. Doug, give us the stats.
All right, published in 2024 and 2025. Board Game Geek says 2024. I think the Kickstarter version may have released in 2024, but the retail edition is coming out in 2025, I believe in a couple of weeks or so. It is from Lucky Duck Games and Warped Reality Games. The designer is Graydon Baker, and the art is by Andrew Bosley, who you will recognize from Everdell. It is for 1 to 4 players, about 60 to 90 minutes. The box says 14 plus. I'm going to say you can probably get away with 12 plus, but it is going to be a light hobby game. And The description is nestled deep in the forest of Azerland, a hidden town known only by its handcrafted magical potion holds a yearly summer solstice festival. But it's up to you whether you'd like to give the freshly brewed potions to newly arriving pilgrims or imbibe in the sweet elixirs yourself. In Potions of Azerland, players take on the role of potion masters, foraging and buying new ingredients, studying new recipes, brewing, and giving potions away to acquire prestige. The game plays over 6 rounds, each with 4 phases, with most of the action occurring simultaneously. In the first phase, players refresh the public market, welcome new visitors, and reveal a new round bonus or objective. In the second phase, players will order priority tiles to determine which actions they'd like to take and get more benefits from, or go first in. Simultaneously, players insert their tiles into the holder, prioritizing lower numbers over higher numbers. Of course, a player can also forgo any action to collect coins by working around town. In Phase 3, players can drink any potions in their collection to activate special abilities, such as activating a personal black market, gaining gold from their opponents, or rolling the powerful potion dice. In the final phase, players take actions based on player priority. While foraging, players roll the foraging dice to collect potion ingredients. When players study, they advance along tracks to gain new potion abilities. The market allows players to acquire ingredients from the market with gold. However, the markets are first come, first serve, in where the player with the highest priority purchases first, and they can purchase as much as they'd like. The brew action lets players convert their ingredients into potions, with the priority number determining how many potions a player can brew. And lastly, players may fulfill visitor orders with the required potions to gain prestige and rewards. Like the market, these orders get fulfilled in player order. In addition, for most actions, players may spend apprentice tokens to improve the benefits that they receive. The game ends after 6 rounds, and the player with the most prestige wins. So will you have a wee dram of your potions, or will you delight visitors with your fantastical concoctions in the next game of Potions of Azerland? So that is how Potions of Azerland plays. What do you like about this one, Michael?
Yeah, real quick, 5 or 6 phases and rounds. Is there 6?
There are 4 phases over 6 rounds.
6 rounds. Yep.
And there
All right.
are 5 actions in the 4th phase.
And so I guarantee you I will confuse some of that. So please just keep correcting me throughout this segment. One thing that I absolutely love about this game, I enjoy blind bidding games. I enjoy that, but what I enjoy about the blind bidding in this is that if I take a save turn, so if I know, okay, I'm not going to be able to forage this round, I'm going to save up to do that, not just in the next round, but I'm going to wait and do that in the 3rd round. I need to get a little bit of currency. I feel like I still, 1, have a ton of choices, and 2, I feel like I get rewarded for saving. That if I save up to forage big time in round 3, I'm chucking a ton of dice. And now I feel like, oh, that was a smart decision. I'm glad that I saved in round 1. And I don't feel like I'm missing out.
Yeah.
I don't always get that feeling in a blind bidding game. I don't always get that feeling in a game where we're maybe competing and racing over certain, I'm just going to call them contracts, but fulfilling those.
Orders,
and I feel like, the orders. In Potions of Azerland, I feel like I'm rewarded for saving on some of those phases in ways that's cool, that's interesting, that's different.
Yeah, I think the big thing for me that I love, my biggest takeaway from this, is that filling up that priority board, and you have these 5 tiles, and they're 2-sided. One side has coins on it, the other one has a number on the other side, and you can flip it upside down to take coins, or you can put it in the numbers. And of course, your highest priorities, your 1s and 2s, have 2 coins on them instead of just 1.
Which is big, folks. If you can go into the marketplace with 4 instead of 2, that's huge.
And so I think, you get these tiles, I'm looking at it, and you're like, okay, well, I know I want to do this. And you put the 1 in there, and then you go, I want to do this. And then maybe I'll go to the market here. And then before you know it, you're like, yeah, but I still need to brew. And I need to forage, like, what if I don't get market? And you're like looking at them. It's like, I want to do all of these.
Yeah.
And then it's like, and at what order am I willing to sacrifice? Like, I can be later in the row. It's like, but if Michael's sitting on a whole bunch of cash, it's like, maybe I need to go to the market before him because he might clean everything out and I don't have much. And so I need to get that one. And so it's like, so I'll put my high priority there. But then that doesn't mean I get a high priority on brewing or fulfilling. And so that thing
Doug just gave you a full replay of
my
the
brain.
initial bidding in round one.
Yeah.
And I'm just going to jump in and tell you one thing that I really like about that. After Doug made that full decision, he doesn't just reveal the bidding. He sets his little dial, which would fit in a hand, face down and has an additional decision. Am I going to drink the potion right now?
Yeah.
Or are we going to reveal? And so I really like that tension as well. Although the game is very procedural and has a clear do this, do this, do this, and then do this, there's some magic that happens at the table within each of those phases. And this is one thing that I just want to say, and then I won't rant too long. I really enjoy this game, Doug. I really enjoy this game at the table with other people. I have talked at length about the joys of Board Game Arena and how I enjoy playing with, some of our listeners and people all around the world. I just want to caution some of our day one listeners, people who will, go right to Board Game Arena and see that Potions of Azerland is available and play it. Hold off on making a decision about the game until you get a chance to play it in person. Yeah. I think this is a game that will be readily available in a lot of convention libraries. I think this is a game that will get out there and isn't just going to disappear. I think this is a game that will have some staying power because it is fun, and something is missed in the screen in playing it online because there's magic in those phases where I'm looking across the table and just, what is Doug doing and what is he thinking? And then the person to my right, well, they don't care because they're basically playing a solo game of this. And then the person sitting between me and Doug, what are they doing? And that tension is wonderful. And that is the thing that I really love about the game. I love the little tension that happens in the different phases. I'll send it back to you.
Well, you don't get the reactions when you reveal and you're like, oh, I can't believe you went higher than me on that.
Yeah.
Or I'm the only one that went on this and I wasted my 2. Like everybody else got coins. Like you don't get that virtually. To follow
or when
up,
the tiebreaker gets handed from one person to the next. Like, no. I wanted to win the tiebreaker in the next phase. Oh, shoot. So I'm going to lose? I'm not going to actually get it?
Yeah. I think even though that initial placement of tiles seems very restricting and I can't do everything, it still provides extremely fulfilling turns. That's the big difference. Sometimes there are games that feel very restricting and punishing, and I wish I could do more. And then the payoff of those turns is not very remarkable, so you feel like you're doing work. This is one where the turns are restrictive, but you always feel like you're making progress. You always feel like good things are happening because none of them are terrible, right? There's a kind of a payout sheet of whoever had the highest priority maybe gets to brew 4 potions, and I only get to brew 2 or 1. Well, sometimes I only have the materials to brew 1, so it's not that big of a deal. Or I have apprentices, so I can boost that up and do a couple more. So I like that they are rewarding turns. And although a lot of the game is played simultaneously, as people are filling out their priority trackers and brewing their potions and things like that, the other players are directly impacting your outcome. You are touching base every phase of the game and seeing how those things play out. And that Michael touched on it, even that idea of like, should I use this potion for fulfillment and get points, or drink it and get a benefit now? And that is a really hard choice sometimes to make.
And one that people can easily make incorrectly or get lost in it, and then it's punishing, right?
Yeah.
Because, nope, I have these 3 potions. These 2 potions are going to go to fulfill that. I already know it. But then you get to that decision but if I take this potion right now, that's going to give me a research bonus. Yeah, I'm going to do that.
Yeah.
And what a game that it can. It's
Yeah.
also very simple and straightforward with those decisions as well. They're
Yeah.
not hidden. They're out there for you to make.
Yeah, Michael mentioned the ties are resolved very cleanly, very much like Nidavellir, where you're passing a tiebreaker cauldron back and forth between one another.
Yep.
I will mention we talked about the age being that 12 plus, maybe 14 plus. The thing to be aware of with this game is that this game will not work if your kids are unable to function autonomously. This is not a game that you can play and kind of be a helper and also play with them competitively.
No, you'd have to do a full partnership because the amount of engagement. I agree with that, Doug. The amount
The
of
hidden information.
Yeah, but the amount of engagement within each phase and how those phases tie together, right? Because when I'm prioritizing the bids, I know the amount of currency. I know what I want to try to get out of the marketplace. I know what resources I'm doing because there's only 3 spells, and I'm doing all of that in my head, right? And so, but I need to be able to do it. I need to be able to engage and concentrate and carry those 2 or 3 things. It's not hobby level, but I need to be able to carry those things throughout the game. And if somebody is saying, "What do I do here? What do I do there? How do I do this? What about this? What about that?" Yeah, that's you might as well just be a game manager at that point.
And then maybe that's the solution is if you've got kids that are in that range, a game of you facilitating the game where you can look at their priority tracker and then say, well, maybe you should think about this, or have you thought about that or that, as opposed to playing with them as part of that initial experience. Like, I can't set my priority thing and then look at yours and try and tell you what you should do without knowing.
Yeah.
Well, I also know what I'm doing.
And I don't think it's 14 plus unless you want to play it the way that Doug had just described it. Like if you want to play independently and then you're probably going to have 14, 15-year-old gamers. I do think 10-year-olds are going to be able to get the rules down and be able to go through it. And if you have a training wheels game, where you're partnering up, or if you have a facilitating game, I think you can get 10 and 11-year-olds into this game pretty easily after an intro game, even a half of a game.
Yeah, it's just not going to be one that it's not a ticket to ride that you pull off the shelf and everybody's going to be playing at the same level. You do need a little bit of that onboarding in order to. But once they get it, I think you're exactly right. It's very doable as a family game.
Yeah, I only have one buyer beware, but I have it and it's strong. And you might disagree, but let me get all the way to the end because I actually tested it on Board Game Arena after it happened in our game. At 2 players, there's only 2 3-cost visitor cards in the deck. And so at 2 players, there can be, at least in my experiences with the game, a bit of a race, and a first one to get that 12-pointer can pull away. And I feel like at 3 players, that's not going to happen because you have a third 3-cost visitor in the game. And I might be getting too nuanced in there, but I just, if you only play with 2, just be aware of that you could have that experience that those 3 potion cards are powerful and it's awesome. And the game's also set up where you're likely not going to be able to buy both of them, right?
Yeah.
If you buy one early, it could set you up and set you ahead and give you a little bit of a track. So just beware of that. If you only play with one other person in your life, I think this game still is awesome at 2, but I will tell you at 3, there's just a bounce that's happening where people are bouncing off of each other in a really cool way. And this is a game that I hope we continue to come back to. Hope that comes into high fives and gets brought back to the table. I don't want this to just be review and move on to the next one. I want to continue to experience it. I hope they support it. I hope it's one that gets some expansions and maybe the player count gets bumped up to 5 with an expansion, and there's just more stuff because there's a cool system there.
The other thing too is that the art is by Andrew Bosley, which is amazing. But what I really enjoy and appreciate out of it is how bright and vibrant the colors and the feel of this game is on the table.
Yep.
Because it very easily could have been darker druids and real darker tones. And I'm not talking about like dark subject matter tones. I'm just
you're talking
about
Euro brown.
Yeah, or just like dark purples and dark greens and that type of thing. And this is a very bright game. Think Quacks of Quedlinburg. And in comparison, it makes Everdell look muted and a darker.
Why'd you have to do that? You were building up the artist. He was probably smiling if he were listening. Somebody we'd love to have on as an interview. And then you just trashed one of my favorite games of all time.
Did not say that. I did not trash it at all. I said that the aesthetic is darker. And I love the bright colors. That's not a common choice in board gaming.
Yeah.
Without it being, it's either, most of the time when people go bright, it's garish. And they're like, ooh, that's a little too much. Like, tone it down. You got a bright orange car type of thing. This is a great balance. It looks really good on the table. What kind of skills do you think are in this one, Michael?
Oh, man. I covered a lot of them already just in my basic description and initial reaction. I do think that decision-making, although we talk about it a lot with the risk management and the observation are kind of my triumvirate of skills to bring in here. Decision-making is a core skill that's in all the games that we talk about, but the game that allows players to make decisions based on currently or previously available information. Seeing how cards are coming out. I don't want to get too in the weeds into the game, but I want to just mention one thing and then I'll send it back to you because I think it does tie into the risk management and the resource management in a great way. When you drink a spell, you get a little ability that is then unlocked for you to use throughout the game. But drinking a spell, that's a resource that's then gone. When you drink a level 1 spell, it can unlock a black market potion. Sorry. It can unlock the black market for you. So you have 2 cards that only you can buy as the game goes on. That's just one example. When you drink the speed spell, and the other spells have other little abilities too that are awesome. And that is an early decision that I think, especially for young gamers, which potion are you going to drink? Because I think in order to be successful in the game, you've got to unlock some of those early. Yeah, you can't unlock all 3 because you're going to get behind and not be able to then, fulfill orders. So that initial decision of, whoa, what am I going to do? But I don't think you can also just spam it and do the same thing every time. No. We have somebody in our game group who mentioned that. I called him after the first day and we got in a little bit of an argument because he's like, well, I don't know what I would do differently. I said, well, if you played that game again, you lose. And I kind of got back and forth on it because I think that the pushes and the pulls are great, and it's one that I would like to play with some younger gamers and play with my family to see how they react to it. But the decision making with the risk management and the resource management, I think, are all there and they're apparent. And I really think they would come out in repeated plays if this was like one of your 10 favorite games that your family had.
Yeah, I think the resource management is a really strong one on the idea of. Everything seems to have its own counterbalance of scarcity, which is you can go up into the idea and think, oh, well, I'm just gonna buy all my ingredients at the market. Well, sometimes the things don't show up, and if you're accumulating coins, you're not doing other actions. Like the only way to get coins is to forego other actions, and so that well dries up pretty quickly. You can go forage. But you're rolling dice and you're not sure exactly what you're going to get. I hope I can do that. But then I can't just brew a whole bunch of stuff if I don't have the ingredients in the first place. And so all of those things kind of pull at each other and how you manage that. And I think it leads into something you had said earlier, which I think is time management. Which is, we define that as improving a player's ability to organize and plan how long they spend on specific activities before running out of time. There are only 6 rounds in the game.
Yep.
And there are, in order to play this game efficiently or effectively, there are going to have to be rounds where you're like, I'm not going to brew this round so I can brew a ton the next round and fulfill. And maybe you're heavy on acquiring ingredients one whole round, and the next one is a little bit of both. And trying to figure out how you do that so you can maximize the time that you're spending and not run out, because having a whole bunch of potions at the end of the game doesn't do a whole lot of good for you. Ingredients. I'm sorry.
Ingredients, yeah. Potions at the end of the game could do some good for you.
Could do some good, but that type of thing, and of course it comes up in almost every game. But that tactical thinking of, I put a high priority on this. Now I'm at the bottom. I was expecting to maybe get more ingredients out of this or brew a little bit more. How can I do that? How can I pivot and still have good turns? Or how can I get those apprentices to make sure I can avert some of that risk? I think those pop up in this game as well.
Well, and where that risk management can really come into the game is in repeated plays if the gamers know how to play the game.
Yeah.
There's some rules overhead. This is not what I refer to as an indoor recess game. This is not a game that you're just going to leave set up on your kidney table in your 6th grade classroom and think that people are going to be able to play it. It's rated at 14 plus on Board Game Geek. But I think once there's familiarity with how those resources can be traded in to get multiple potions, but there's also the race of fulfilling, making sure that you're able to get the points, and how all of that works together. Tricky little puzzle. I'll say, though, I've only played this game with adults, so I want to be clear on that and not do any pretending on our podcast as well. So
sure.
That's something that I would have to, really test out more in the wild and playing with my kids and with other people's kids to see how they react to the game as well. But that decision-making, boy, you feel it from about round 2 on.
Round 1. That's the second phase of the entire game is putting in those priority markers, and you're making decisions right from the start.
As soon as people start to buy, all right, what's a technical name? Is it the visitors?
Market?
Nope. When you're fulfilling orders.
You're fulfilling visitor orders.
As soon as a visitor disappears off the bottom of the board, and then new visitors come in round 2, it's like, oh boy, those are the points. That's how I need to win the game. And to me, that is when the risk management is really underway.
Yeah, no, mine happens when I look at it and I say, well, of course I need to forage. And of course I need to go to the market, and I need to study to make my It's like, wait, I can't do any of these. I can't do all of them. So I think the overarching theme here is that Potions of Azerland is an awesome game, great artwork, very fun to play, very rewarding. And we think you should go ahead.
How'd you find one more thing before we move on? I just want to get your take on it. How'd you find the rule book, Doug, and interact with it? And I know we have the retail version that's we've been playing. There's also a Kickstarter Deluxe that we haven't interacted with. But how did you find the rule book?
I think it was pretty solid. I felt like it jumped around a little bit from section to section until the whole thing kind of comes into view. And there is a little bit of a appendix or a glossary of all of the visitors of what their various powers and abilities may be, which you don't need to use a ton, so it's not. But the player aids are awesome. It's got great
quick
player
reference
aids.
Guide's really good too. That last page I found myself going to when we were playing. So on that front, good. Nothing to be upset about or nothing to overly praise either. So is kind of where that sits. So that is our game of the week, Potions of Azerland from Lucky Duck Games and Warped Reality Games. The School of Gaming. In the School of Gaming, we discuss concepts, keywords, etiquette, and helpful ideas in the world of gaming. This week, we discuss how do you know if or when you are too far into the hobby?
I started making some notes for this one, and I felt like I was Jeff Foxworthy creating a list of jokes.
You might be a redneck.
Yeah, you might be too far into the hobby if. I don't know how you.
Are we going to do that? We're going to go back and forth? We could take the next half hour.
No, they're not jokes. That's kind of how it felt like while I was writing them out. Wow, how did you approach this one?
As an open conversation, Doug.
Okay. I think, trying to think in exactly, I feel like this comes out of conversations that you and I have had
Yeah.
repeatedly of how people are in the hobby, the topics around jargon and gatekeeping. These are all things that tends to come from content creators and the way that, sometimes they come across from a hobby standpoint and where it is. I think for me, the starting point is you're too, and in this case, I'm too far into the hobby. I'm using more as a negative connotation as opposed to like, yeah, you're in the hobby when you don't let somebody touch your games with Cheeto fingers. Like, not that funny haha type thing, but like you're too far into the hobby that you've lost perspective is kind of where I approach this. And I think one of the big ones is when you're unable to relate to or remember what it's like being a new gamer and first getting into the hobby, you're too far in. And I think you can get as deep as you want, but you still need to have an eye at that door that's opening in the distance and just still see that light out there from where I walked in. I walked in there 10 years ago, 12 years ago. I was at that front door. Still keep that door open, and you can come into the room as far as you want, as long as you can still see that doorway. And I think a lot of people get too far away, slam the door, don't see it, and it's like there's a lot of people out there that are just trying to get into the hobby, and you're not being helpful because you've lost that perspective.
As this topic's been coming up, I've been thinking a lot about it, and I don't want to get too much into the scholarly side, but one, I come back to Huizinga's Magic Circle, right? And this idea that we're here, we're playing together because we have a social agreement. We've created a magic circle, and some of the scholars who really brought that idea to me are a guy named Eric Zimmerman, who you might know as the designer to Quantum, right? Was a professor at UW-Madison and in a department GLS, Games Learning and Society. And at that time, I think he was a grad student. But anyways, I digress. Like, they talked a lot about approachability, engagement, openness, letting people play, and not putting up too many criteria and parameters around who's allowed to sit at the table and play.
Yeah.
And I think for me, I am too far. I'm having a tough time making generalizations and just separating myself from it, right? But I think I am too far into the hobby when I'm not allowing others in.
Yeah.
And also when I'm demanding that others come with me. I think there's a double-edged sword there.
Yeah.
That I could be too enthusiastic and say, you got to play this type of game. You got to have this experience. I had a great time. You need to come do this right now. That's also too far into the hobby. When I am putting demands on other people's time and experiences, that's when I'm too far into the hobby. And I've been on both sides of that. I think when all are not welcome at the table, that's too far into the hobby. So where we say that people must possess some sort of viewpoint, belief, or stance in order to be welcome at my table, that's too far into the hobby.
Yeah, and I think you hit the nail on the head with the idea of these are not coming from a place of people should do better. These are conversations I'm having with myself constantly, right? Of personally, of like making sure that I'm able to remember what it was like being a new gamer and relating to that, and knowing that I'm not perfect all the time with those things, and to be more aware of that. You had mentioned the idea of like putting stuff on other people's time and that type of thing. I put on my list that like when you become a hammer searching for a nail, and you seem to shoehorn board games into every conversation you have in life, like that type of thing where it's like, oh yeah, there's a board game about that, and it's like everything always just reverts back to board games. Like that's a problem. Like you're too far in, and I'm not saying that you can't share and enjoy your hobby and celebrate what you like, but it can go too far where it's like, everything I see, I can see a way that I could fit board games into this conversation. And maybe if I do it enough, I'm going to find the one thing that guy will finally come and play a game with me that I've been waiting, like that type of stuff.
And I'm guilty of that all the time because this is one of my number one passions, you know? So I think it's, it's good to hear. It's good to know. We recently covered gatekeeping in the hobby, and to me, this is that other side of the coin. It's not gatekeeping. You're not saying that people need to be left out, but it's like, at what point do I need to hit pause on the hobby and get back to the other parts of life? I guess at what point do I need to take a break from this magic circle that I've created perpetually and get back to the other parts of life?
Well, and I think there's a failure sometimes for people in the hobby, and myself included, to realize that a majority of people don't know about Board Game Geek or the things that we
talk about that a lot. That's
we kind
a
of
good point.
take for granted as a part of our hobby and culture of like, oh, of course, I look it up on Board Game Geek. I know who the designer is. And it's like, there are millions of people. Like, I'm just going to do a quick search here to see on Board Game Geek, when you use the tool I'm talking about, to say Ticket to Ride. And we are going to look that there have been over 1 million copies of Ticket to Ride sold. Right? I mean, at minimum.
It's like 20 million.
Is that what it's up to
Yeah.
now? I wasn't sure what that exact number is. But even if you say it's a million, only 139,000 people have marked that they own it on Board Game Geek. Well, where's the other 700, or 790,000, 800, whatever people?
18 million, Doug.
18 million.
18 million, yeah.
So what is that? 10%, less than 10%? 1%?
1%.
1%. 1% of people, all the people that have bought a copy of of Ticket to Ride, have bothered to mention that they own it on Board Game Geek. That tells you how many people are playing games that don't know about Board Game Geek. And I think that's important to remember. Like, that is a bubble and an ecosystem that we live in, that people that are gaming and gaming maybe a lot, like, doesn't mean that Ticket to Ride is the only game in their collection, have no desire or need to even go to Board Game Geek to engage in that part of the hobby.
Yeah, I think the initial question for the school of gaming, how do you know when you've gone too far in the hobby? Well, probably when you start a podcast to talk about the hobby.
Yeah,
so
of course.
we check that box. But then, that time, treasure, and talent of how much am I putting into this hobby, that answer, it's different for everybody.
Yeah.
So it's not for me to say when somebody else has gone too far into the hobby. The thing that's out there, though, is like, it is a never-ending pool. Like
Yeah.
there's always a convention, there's always a cruise, there's always a place to go. And it's one of those things that I think the comparison game is where the hobby can get very dangerous, right?
Yeah.
If I'm trying to keep up with somebody or experience everything, I'm only going to go too far.
Yeah.
And I think that the games are meant, for me, games are meant to be enjoyed with friends and family and people I love. And at the same time, I'm also glad that there's solo versions out there too, so that I can
Yeah.
still experience some of those games and not have to pull people or push people.
Yeah. No, great stuff there. And we'd love to know in the Discord or email us, reach out. What makes you feel like you're either too far in, or when did that happen? And in some ways, it's the idea of if and when. Maybe it's not bad. Maybe it's not a negative connotation. I sometimes see it as that way when I feel people use that as a gate, right? But everybody's, you may have 3 games and feel like I'm getting too far in. Like,
Yeah.
who could need this much type of stuff? I could play this game for the rest of my life. And there's other people that have 10,000 games that like, I still need that new one that came out. And they think, well, I'm, just on the cusp of getting into the hobby. Everybody's scale of where they're at personally is interesting. And so I'd love to hear what other people think. I guess primarily where they think they are and what they think that cap is, of, and I think for me, rooted down to me personally is always wanting to remember and recall why I love the hobby and why I started doing it in the first place, and not losing sight of that, because I think when you lose sight of that, that's when things start to teeter or over the edge of cynicism, and you lose that fun in a hobby that is supposed to be fun.
Yeah, and I would love to hear from some of the folks who work in the hobby too. As how do they continue to find joy
Yeah.
in it? So
Cool. So let us know, and we will move on to the high five. Every week, Michael and I highlight a list of games we want to play, enjoy, or spread the word about, and everybody loves lists. So this week, we're going to talk about our high five simulation games in a good way. And so this is a list of not necessarily games that are straight up simulations and are super dry, and you're going to it's going to take 5 hours to build the machine that you're trying to build, that type of stuff. It's a game that makes, for me anyway, a game that makes me feel like I'm doing what is depicted in the game, but in a way that remains its fun level, and without a lot of stretches in mechanisms to account for, we're going to gloss over this type of thing. How is that similar to what you did? Or
I'll tell you what, Doug, this is probably the most challenging list of the past 100 for me. Yeah, this was a really tough
come
list to
up
put
with 5?
Together.
Or narrow it down?
No, not to narrow it down, to really just piece together. And I think that has to do with, how when I play games, that's not something that I'm looking to do. I'm just looking to play the game and have a good time,
Yeah.
And so this was a tough one to put together. It was a fun one to put together. I ended up with 6, so I have 5 and 1 honorable mention. Any caveats for you before I jump in and get started?
No, mine was actually the opposite, where I felt like it was really hard for me to pin down of what I thought feels like this. I feel like I'm doing what they're telling me on the box that I'm doing.
Interesting.
And so I felt like I had a lot of them, and I had to like kind of distill it down to ones that are like, no, these are really pure in that regard. So I'm interested to see what you have on your list.
Cool. Number 5 for me is Smartphone Inc. We discussed this in episode 77 in our School of Gaming. It's designed by Ivan Lashin. Artist is Victor Miller Gausa, and publishers Cosmodrome Games and also Arcane Wonders here in the United States. Smartphone Inc. makes me feel like I'm running a smartphone company in 2018 to 2019 in a moment of time. And I want to be very specific about that because there's 4G technology. You have these two little, which look like early iPhones or Android phones, if you dare say that, or even Windows phones, if we're going back to like 2009-ish, that you are putting on top of each other to give yourself the resources in the game. You're trying to get into competitive markets. Just an awesome game. And that's number 5 for me is Smartphone Inc.
All right, my number 5 we talked about in episode 63. That's Freedom the Underground Railroad. This came out in 2013 and Academy Games designer Brian Mayer. And this is a game that I feel like I'm trying to help free slaves and get out of the South in Civil War times. And it's like, that may seem strange to say, but the impact that this game had on playing it and the reflection and just kind of stepping back, and it's like, okay, this is more than a game. And I had fun playing it, and it was a fun puzzle, and it was impactful and meaningful that I really felt like it deserved a spot on this list of the history that's in the game and the way that it's working. And never in a game have I put so much value on a cube.
Yeah.
You know, you think about the amount of, the representation of what that cube is in a game. And sometimes there's stuff like that. It's like, I don't want to lose any of them. And that was really profound. I've not played a game where I was like, I can't lose any of these. This can't happen. And so that's why it's on my list at number 5, Freedom, the Underground Railroad.
That is an incredible poll. We talked about that in our School of Gaming episode back in 63. I feel like we covered that game with really solid respect and reverence. The only thing I want to chime in, that game sent me into a near depression. I mean, so if you want to talk about like that was a heavy game.
Yeah.
So if you go back and listen to that episode, it's not one we took lightly. It's one that we played over about a month and a half, a lot, and really thought about how are we going to talk about this. So great one. Yeah, missed that one. That should have been on my list. We're at number 4, correct?
Yep.
Number 4 for me, designed by Phil Walker Harding. Game of the week, all the way back in episode 78. Doesn't feel like it's that long ago, and that's Planted, a game of nature and nurture. 2022, published by Buffalo Games. That's what I was looking for. Sorry for that. And this is one that I feel like I am curating a houseplant collection.
Yes. And watering them.
Yeah, that's the closest thing that I will ever come to having a houseplant collection is Planted. Not something that I would do on the daily, but I have siblings who do, and my wife does, and really cool game that I continue to come back to on about an annual basis. One that I just can't let go out of my collection because it plays in 30 minutes. The production quality in this game, folks. I mean, if this is your first time hearing about it, if you are a new listener, just go back to episode 78 and listen to Doug and I gush about Planted.
Yeah.
But I do feel like I'm making some choices about my favorite houseplants in that game. So that's my number 4 is Planted.
Cool. Great pull there. My number 4 is a game called Bottom of the Ninth, which came out in 2015 from Dice Hate Me Games and Greater Than Games. The designers are Daryl Lauder and Mike Mullins. In Bottom of the Ninth, you are playing in the bottom of the ninth of a baseball game. One team is at the plate, one team is pitching, and your pitcher have 2 discs in your hand. One of them is high and low, inside, outside. And you are taking that disc, your 2 discs, and making a pitch. You want it to be high and inside, low and outside. The batter is doing the same thing, and the pitcher has a special sweet spot pitch. And the second guessing of that is so spot on if you have ever played baseball or watched baseball, of that pitcher batter duel.
Yeah.
That to not say we're going to make a whole baseball game or we're going to do all of this. It's like, no, we're focusing on this duel between two players.
One versus one
is so cool and so well done that it's like, oh, God, I think he's going to go with that fastball high and inside. And it's like, and if you connect, awesome. And it's literally ball and strike. And then when you hit it and you're rolling dice to try and run, and it's just really well done for the microcosm of the time that it represents. It does so well. That's my number 4, bottom of the 9th.
That's awesome, Doug. My number 3, I'm going to stick with the sports theme here. It's the only sports game on my list. This is a racing game. This was a game of the week. However, it doesn't make me feel like a race car driver. It makes me feel like something else that I don't do. Because if folks who've listened, we talk about games, I might have some compulsiveness. That might separate Doug and I. It might be a trait that I have. This game makes me feel like a gambler. And that is Downforce, which we covered back in episode 34.
Interesting.
I don't bet on horses. I don't bet on race cars. But if I did, I'd want to play some Downforce because I like Downforce is from Restoration Games, designed by Rob Davio, Justin D. Jacobson, and Wolfgang Kramer. And not only are you betting on your car, but you're betting on where other cars are going to finish at very specific points in the game. And it makes me feel like a gambler, but it also makes me feel like I'm a kid again. There is a sense of toy factor and fun factor, but also it plays up to a lot of people. It's a game I need to get back to the table, man. I haven't played it in a while, and when the list was being put together, I was like, I've got to get that on there. It makes me feel like I'm running a betting house, gambling house a little bit. So that's my number 3 is Downforce.
I thought you were going to say Heat.
I know.
Metal,
I threw a curveball there,
which was on my short list.
But Heat, I don't get that feeling, and that's why I think this list is tough for driver? Me. No, so I don't. I don't get the feeling as a race car driver or as a gambler like I do in Downforce, and maybe it's just recency that I've played it more. I don't know. I love Heat. Heat's an awesome game, but for a simulation of if I'm gambling, so that's what I'm saying. That's the stretch. It's Downforce.
Interesting. All right, my number 3 is the life simulator. We talked about it in episode 130, and that is Pursuit of Happiness, 2015 from Artipia Games, Adrian Abella and David Churkop. This is just a great game where your resource is your time and where you spend that time, and you have a job, and you can get promoted and work more and get more money, but it's going to be at the detriment of family members and hobbies and activities, and maybe you can have a girl or a boyfriend or a husband and wife, and then they take time. You gotta spread it out. I love that it goes from young to old age, and if you've lived healthy, maybe you get an extra round that everybody else doesn't get, and people slowly die off at the end of the game, and just a really cool taking the game of life and putting it on steroids to the next level, and that's Pursuit of Happiness for me, my number 3.
Yeah, great call, great game. When did we cover that? You said it, but
130.
Wow,
episode 130.
Yeah, goes quick. That does not feel like it was that long ago. Number 2 for me is a pirate adventure game, and that's Dead Reckoning. And I feel like I am a pirate in Dead Reckoning. I'm going to say something here. Please don't go out and overspend just because somebody on a podcast said it. But I really enjoy the Sea Dogs expansion. It's a way to modify your crew. And when I'm playing Dead Reckoning, especially if I'm playing it solo, I can just, shuffle in one of those Sea Dogs expansions to go with a saga. And boy, I feel like I am on a ship and I'm putting together a crew and we're leveling up and we're on an adventure together, and it's all in my imagination and head. So admittedly, it's a simulation game, but I definitely feel it more when I'm playing solo because I can control all the parts of the game. Not a great thing to say, but head-to-head, the fighting in this is also a ton of fun, and there's some randomness where you're just dropping cubes down this ship, and wherever they land, kind of tells you the outcome. So that's number 2 for me is Dead Reckoning. That's designed by John D. Clare. Art is by Ian O'Toole. And as of very recent, there were still dent and ding copies on AEG's website at a very affordable rate. If somebody's looking to get into Dead Reckoning, I want to say it was like $60 and it might be $80, but there's a ton of game in that base game alone. Yeah, it's my number 2, Doug.
All right, cool. My number 2 is one of the first games I thought about when I was thinking about this list, and that is Chocolate Factory from 2019, Alley Cat Games, designers Matthew Dunstan and Brett J. Gilbert. In this game, you are taking cocoa, turning it into chocolate on conveyor belts in your factory to make wrapped candies and boxed candies and chocolate chunk bars and things like that some of them you're putting on display to sell in your shop. Some of them are going to individual customers and managing your employees. And the thing I've never played a Vitel Lacerda or any of the can't think what the publisher is, but the food chain magnet.
Splatter?
Yes, like those type of things where it's like, yes, that's 100% a simulation style game. Chocolate Factory seems like that's the family-friendly version of that style of game. Like I'm getting the same type of thing, but I don't have to get that in depth. That's the in a good way part of the list. And so this is one of them that's been too long since I played it. I wish I played it again.
Let's play it tonight.
Maybe we will. And so that is my number 2, Chocolate Factory.
Oh, that's awesome, Doug. That's really good. I thought about it earlier in the week. I didn't put it on my list. I'm glad that you brought that up. And that game just brings me joy when I hear about it. This next one, if there's crossover, just give me a nod because I don't want to just talk about it. Okay, this next one is Dog Park, which was our game of the week.
Makes you feel like a dog?
Back in episode 124. No, it makes me feel like I'm a dog walker.
Yeah.
And, when you... I knew this game was going to be on our list when I was getting ready for it. And then I punched out my copy with my 9-year-old over the weekend and looked at it and had it out on the table and was just walking through the 4 phases. If you want to hear more about it, like I said, episode 124, we cover this game in great detail, designed by Lottie Hazel and Jack Hazel, husband and wife combo, published by Birdwood Games. They're out of the UK. The production on this is second to none. It is a phenomenal game where the game trays are little like dog bones where you put your meeples into them. And yeah, I know that's the deluxe version, but why do I feel like a dog walker? Because you have to decide which dog you're going to put on the lead, and you have this little leash that you're committing to that dog, and you're giving resources to make sure that you can, be the dog walker. But then during the actual play of the game, you decide how far you're going to go on your walk and when you're going to leave. And man, just the thematic tie-ins from start to finish. We also had a very memorable game where we played with your oldest, where I really felt like we were all 3 walking dogs, and yet we were in your basement.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Approachable. I intentionally didn't put any Lacerdas on here. I wanted to have games that could be played in an hour, where you feel like you did a different task. And for me, Dog Park is my number 1 choice for all those reasons.
Great choice there. My number 1, Michael already mentioned it was his number 5, and that's Smartphone Inc. Came out in 2018, Arcane Wonders, Ivan Lashin. I think this does such a good job. And I know, Michael, like you often say, like, in 2018, circa, that represents that. But from a business standpoint, the features and the things that you're adding are very arbitrary. Whether it's 4G or not, those things apply to making a product that people want. And even a bigger, more important part of that is, how can I give the features that they want in a cost that I can make a profit and sell, and that price manipulation and all of those things that go on in business regardless of the time period that the game is set. I agree it does a phenomenal job of, a face value 2018 smartphone world is 100% represented, but just below that, the business items of supply and demand and marketing and pricing are really at the forefront of this game, and I really appreciate that. So that's why it was my number one. I felt like, okay, I've got to get stores out. I've got to make good phones that people want to buy. I have to price them competitively so they buy my phones instead of Michael's, and getting points like that. So that is my number one. We talked about it in episode 77, Smartphone Inc.
Yeah, and that's in our School of Gaming. Back then, we didn't
Yeah.
have a great place to slot, whether it was a spotlight or shine a light on a game that wasn't a game of the week. So, yeah,
Yep.
awesome, Doug.
What's your honorable mention,
My
Michael?
honorable mention is a game that called Fort, which is a 2 to 4 player game
Yeah, it's
from
a good
Leader
one.
Games, designed by Grant Rodick, and art it has that Kyle Farron art, the same guy that did Root. But it's just a card playing game where you're building forts, and it makes me feel like a kid.
As
you
kids.
as kids, and you're trying to build the coolest fort. A game that has left my collection. That's one of those that I think about every now and then. I was like, maybe I'll get that to the table, and just didn't have quite right group of folks to play it with. But man, I had a ton of fun when I had it, and I had a lot of fun with it, and that made me, who doesn't want to build a fort?
Yeah. So just to rifle through some of these quickly, and some of them didn't make the list because we talk about them quite a bit. They're some of my favorite games, but Distilled, I think, is just a great job of making spirits. Suburbia, if you're looking for a city planning and city building.
Yeah, that's a
Rock
good
Hard
one.
1977 makes me feel like a rock star at that time. Arc Nova, building a zoo. First in Flight does a great job of replicating early flights and airplanes, and that pushing your luck and crashing. Burgle Brothers, I feel like I am in what's the Ocean's 11 is like, it seems like it was ripped right out of that. I feel like I am involved in a caper. And Founding Fathers, which is another historical game.
Yeah,
about,
those are great polls, Doug.
I'm not sure it's a Constitution or Declaration of it. Must be the Constitution, but different factions are fighting to get their beliefs on the
They're trying to get the
Constitution.
Constitution ratified, right? Mm-hmm. Isn't that what you're doing in that one?
Yeah.
Okay.
So those are my honorable mentions. Would love to hear what you guys think, what games we missed. Again, a reminder to subscribe to the podcast. Follow us on X at GameSchoolerU. Subscribe and like our videos on YouTube. Join our Discord. Next week, we're going to be talking about Archeo Society. Oh, let me catch my breath.
Take a breath there, Doug. Next week, folks, we're going to be talking about Archeo Society and what else, Doug?
The history trivia game, positive and negative aspects of hype, and pick up and deliver games. Thank you so much for spending
We got a good one coming up next week, too.
the last hour or so with us. We truly appreciate it.
Now get out there and keep gaming.